So the Women's Voice and Leadership Project, Nigeria, deviated from the normal funding for women's rights organization because of the fact that women's organizations lack resources to do the work that they do. We know that women's organizations are central in achieving gender equality all over the world. In Nigeria, women's groups have been organizing, and we realize that the way donor funding architecture has been constructed over the last couple of years has in a way disenfranchised the local women's rights organization. Therefore, the Women's Voice and Leadership Project took a part that sought to support local women's rights organizations by empowering them with resources and capacity building to be able to achieve their mandates. We know that when it comes to protection intervention, women's rights organizations, especially those at the grassroots level, state level, and even those at the national level, are at the center of providing protection services for women. They are at the center of their first responders when it comes to services. But these same women's organizations lack the resources that they require, especially when it comes to finance, to be able to deliver on their intervention. So seeing this as a huge gap, the Women's Voice and Leadership Project, funded by Global Affairs Canada and being implemented by Action Aid Nigeria, saw it as an opportunity to provide resources to these women's organizations to do their intervention. And believe you me, we've seen success with that, because the project did not restrict them to decide or define, dictate the agenda and the work they do. So what the project did is to allow the women's organization to design their intervention because they understand the issues. They are within the grassroots, they understand these issues, and they know where the problem is. So they are being able to, and given the freedom and space to design their intervention, meant that they're able to design interventions that are critical and central to the achievement of gender equality, to the provision of protection intervention for women and girls, especially when it comes to gender-based issues, and for those who are working in political participation, to provide critical and felt need intervention for women and girls. So we saw success, and we've implemented this project for 2 years, going on to 2 years, and we've seen success. The women's group were at the heart and center of the protests that shook the whole nation on gender-based violence. When the women's group came together to demand for state of emergency in Nigeria, that was success. That hasn't been seen in a long while. Of course, we know that women's group are at the center and have always been pushing for gender equality and have had a result. But what the WVL Fund has allowed them to do is to organize more collectively, and they are pushing things as a group, as a collective, and that is a success that we have seen. We've seen those who are the grassroots, who has never tested money, who has never seen money, they now have resources and they are pushing. In Bauchi, we saw the implementation of the passage of the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. Part of the WVL partners were part of that process that led to the achievement, to that result being achieved. In Kwara, we saw the same thing. So putting resources in the hands of women's organizations is the best way for funding women's group in Nigeria. COVID-19 has actually changed the way that we work. It has reshaped our ways of work. I mean, in fact, it affected all sectors of life. So what we have done and we have seen is that what COVID has done for us is that it has exposed the issues that the feminist organizations, the women's rights organization has been saying, has been clamoring for, has been putting in the front burner of public discourse in terms of provision of resources for local women's rights organizations to be able to do their work, especially when it comes to protection intervention. We saw what happened in the when the increase in spike in gender-based violence at home level, at intimate partner level, because of the lockdown. Women and girls are locked up with their who are in abusive relationship are locked up in the homes and because of the lockdown. So we saw an increase, a spike in gender-based violence. And so what that revealed to everyone is the fact that we lack resources, we lack critical protection services for women and girls in the country. So it set us thinking at the development partners level that we need to begin to rethink the way we work. We need to begin to rethink the way we respond to gender-based violence. And I saw a whole lot of women's group coming up and taking up that space. You know, we saw women's group who have emerged and are providing responses to addressing gender-based violence. And so what that has done for us as a project and as an organization is the fact that we began to think and to look at the organizations that have been doing this work. So we saw emergence of young organizations, or organizations who have been working with their resources, with their blood, like Dorothy Njemanze Foundation, like Dinidari Foundation, and a whole lot of other organizations. We have seen that these organizations, when you put resources in their hands, they are actually making impact. So that shapes the way, that redefined the way we begin to see funding for GBV responses. Again, it also tells us that we may begin to look at putting money for shelter provisioning, right? One of the critical areas that we have lacked resources in the country. In Nigeria and in FCT, for instance, you can be amazed that we have less than 10 shelter centers where women and girls can access protection when they face abuse. So what WVL has done is to adapt to the new challenges and to the new realities that COVID-19 has presented to us by providing resources to actors to be able to provide responses to or interventions to those critical areas. So we've adapted to that, and we are learning from that process to ensure that resources are put in the right place. Actors who are supposed to be providing those responses are resourced to do that, and linkages and alliances are built for those who want to actually work within the sector. So it has shaped us, but we are adapting to that situation and we are responding. So the work on addressing women's political participation and its interconnectedness or interconnections to gender-based violence is very critical and very obvious. The fact that if we do have increased number of women in politics, increased number of women who understand the issues that women and girls are facing, it will yield to results. So our work on supporting women's political participation, women's participation in governance and leadership is very strategic and very towards ensuring that we achieve results. And we're very clear and we're very aware of the interconnections between the two. So what we are doing is to also support through the Women's Voice and Leadership Project and through other grants that we do have to support women's groups that are working on women political participation and governance and women's leadership to be able to build that strand of work. Because when you governance is very central to achievement of dignity of life, of achievement of our sustainable goal. Politics is at the center of everything that we do. So if we don't get that strand of work right, is also going to affect other strands. So we understand that interconnection, and that is why we are funding local women's rights organizations also to work towards increasing women's participation in political processes, in decision-making spaces, and in governance spaces, so that they can make their voices heard and they can create the change that we desire. Once we get that right, that means that other strands of work or other areas or sectors of life will also be affected and achieved. So the work that we are currently doing is to also subgrant organizations like Women in Politics, like 100 Women Lobby Group that push for women's participation, as well as League of Women Voters that are also mobilizing women to ensure that they are participating in electoral process. So with these strands with these actors and other actors who are also working in women's political participation, we are ensuring that these groups are able to change the political landscape. They are also influencing the internal political party democracies to ensure women's increase in number of women who are representing and participating in politics. So that strand of work is leading towards our achievement of the overall project objective, which is that women and girls will live a life of dignity, enjoy their rights, and they can enjoy their rights as human beings. So that strand of work is allowing us to engage that space, and also once that is achieved, we are towards the right way to achieving the project objective. Okay, so let me list 3 things that can improve LGBT response in Nigeria. I think those 3 things will be: 1, funding women's group. Funding is critical to achieving LGBT response in Nigeria, or result in Nigeria. Because when women's group have the resources that they require to be able to provide intervention, they will be able to respond. And you will see that strategic actions will be delivered by those organizations because they have the resources that they require. That is one thing. The second thing that is required to improve LGBT response in Nigeria will be coordination. Coordination is important, and we know that what is happening within Nigeria and within development sector is the interagency rivalry. We know that certain agencies want to be seen as leading on the response. We want to some other actors that want to see themselves as being the champions within that sector. But no one human being, no one agency, no one institution, no one organization can achieve this response if we do not have that coordination. It is important. If we do not recognize that every single one of us can contribute and bring resources together, and we bring our resources together, we will not be able to achieve the result. The other thing is about documentation, evidence gathering. We do know that a whole lot of women's group are do a lot of things, but the problem with us in Nigeria is about documentation, our evidence base. So I think that the responsible agency, especially the Apex Gender Machinery, which is the Ministry of Women Affairs, should be supported to begin to ensure that data is collected and stored and used and informs decision in LGBT response. It's very critical, and I see that the Ministry of Women Affairs is working towards getting that in place. So critical things, like I said earlier, 3 things: fund women's rights organization, ensure that there is coordination, and finally ensure that responses, that we collect our data and store those data. So if you look at what the 16 days of activism is showing us, I mean, the theme for the year, it's very, 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 very clear. It talks about fund, respond, collect, right? Collect. I think these are the 3 critical theme of the 16 days of activism. So it's in a way wraps the situation for us. It's in a way shows us where our resources, where our time, where our energy should be focused on within this period, within the LGBT response. If we don't do that, we are all deceiving ourselves. We need to get our acts right.